seize the silence. This event is nothing other than a direct manifestation of free speech. We need not be afraid due to the rights bestowed upon us by our government, which it swore to uphold. Free speech is undoubtedly a powerful concept that can permit more open and tolerable societies. But what are its drawbacks? How does free speech, which is provided in the Constitution at a time when only one group of people in this nation were truly free, recontextualize itself today? I believe it can address the reinterpretation of free speech and the reintegration of many of its complex facets into public discourse. The first topic to address is, what is free speech? Is it the right to simply say what one pleases, when they please, without repercussions? Or is it the right to speak without repercussions from the government? There are obvious limitations, such as necessary clauses, barring speech that can cause clear and present danger, such as yelling fire in a packed theater. But what constitutes clear and present danger? The United States' history with free speech has been at best murky, with many laws restricting free speech until the mid-20th century. In present times, inflammatory speech has been associated with violence. While dehumanizing speech can and has led to unspeakable acts of violence and trauma, where does it begin? How far can you go along the slope before it becomes slippery? This idea has manifested itself in the public sphere, in academia, and in the media. Certain viewpoints have been deemed so culturally unacceptable, so reprehensible, so vile to potentially corrupt our youth that they must be forever regulated to the dark recesses of bigots' minds. This has coincided with the rise of trigger warnings, cherry-picked college speakers, and our general left-leaning academic world. In 2017, the violence in Charlottesville that resulted from white supremacists protesting the removal of Confederate monuments led to one death, and alt-right leader Richard Spencer being banned from speaking at many colleges and universities, such as Ohio State, Kent State, and Michigan State. These rash incidents beg the question, where do we draw the line on not free, but rather acceptable speech? The rising backlash against far-right viewpoints in the media and academia does not seek to limit government-protected free speech, but rather to establish and enforce the boundaries in which it be defined as acceptable speech. The idea of what is and is not tolerable speech has been redefined constantly since the mid-20th century and the rise of movement for racial, gender, and sexual equality. Martin Luther King Jr. redefined free speech when he used civil disobedience in the face of dogs and hoses. Gloria Steinem utilized the power of speech in her daring expose on Playboy and the exploitation of women. Marsha P. Johnson used her free speech in the numerous pride marches she strode in, as in her words, she wanted her gay rights now. Historically marginalized and underrepresented groups now have a larger piece of the pie, and thus have more say in what broaches the boundaries of what is acceptable. More black people and women than ever are entering higher education and college, and the LGBTQ plus community is growing in vocality each year. Calling black people thugs or super predators is no longer considered acceptable, just as the same applies to calling women girly or honey, or calling LGBTQ plus people fairies or fruits. People have recognized the toxic implications that this type of language contains and thus will work to address it. However, what happens when language is used that does not directly insult any one group, but rather advocates for a policy or belief that is or seems to be directly contrary to the rights of the group? Speech that directly insults or dehumanizes any group of people can easily be classified as hate speech, and as such should be banned from public discussion. Many people dismiss this notion, arguing that the line between hate speech and offensive speech can become blurred. However, I believe that there is a way to differentiate between the two, and that arguments on this point at best fall victim to the slippery slope logical fallacy, and at worst serve to perpetuate pre-existing and detrimental power structures and institutions in our society. The best expression of this point comes from Karl Popper, one of the best philosophers of science of the 20th century. In his seminal work, The Open Society and Its Enemies, Popper addresses the limits of tolerance in a free society. Popper warns, if we extend unlimited tolerance, even to those who are intolerant, if we are not prepared to defend a tolerant society against the onslaught of the intolerant, then the tolerant will be destroyed and tolerance with them. Tolerance of the utterly intolerant thus only serves to benefit the intolerant, as those who can afford to be intolerant tend to be those already benefiting from entrenched power structures. This principle and paradox can be applied in two significantly different ways. One method of application from a legal perspective, another from a social. In Germany, swastikas outside of art are banned, the infamous Heil Hitler salute is banned in public, and hate speech is vehemently repressed. The suppression of hate speech, however, does limit free speech and is a form of censorship by the government. Known as Volksverschwörung, or incitement to hatred, the government can criminally punish anyone who incites hatred against any ethnic, religious, or racial group for a period of time in prison for up to 3 months to 5 years. Germany is not alone in these laws. In the UK, violators for inciting hatred against anyone based on sexual orientation, race, skin color, or ethnicity can also be imprisoned. In Brazil, racism is a violatable offense with no statute of limitations, and in Canada, advocating for genocide against any group can lead to 5 years in prison, and advocating for hatred against any group can lead to 2. These measures all serve to perpetuate Karl Popper's paradox, establishing an intolerance for intolerance in the ultimate name of tolerance. The United States, however, has no laws regulating any form of hate speech or verbal intolerance. Instead, censorship of intolerance undergoes a more social transformation. Intolerance is not legally prosecuted, but is rather grappled with in the court of public opinion. It is no longer socially acceptable in the United States to openly declare oneself a racist, or to explicitly advocate for the superiority or subjugation of a race or ethnicity. Many times, prejudices are quoted, often referred to as dogmas of politics, where the intended target hears the quoted message. Many argue that many of President Trump's speech utilizes this principle, such as when he referred to Haiti and countries in Africa with a degrading expletive while asking for more immigrants from countries like Norway. On the one hand, this is a call for immigrants from more economically sound countries, but on the other hand, it's a call for more white instead of black immigrants. Public intolerance of intolerance led to intense backlash from the left against Trump's comments. This social form of censorship is what is caused a modern uproar in academia and higher education, with students, professors, and administrations limiting the expression of certain viewpoints in classrooms and on campus. These viewpoints tend to be from the more conservative side of the political spectrum, and are often banned because they are seen as espousing hatred or intolerance. Advocates for viewpoint diversity and free speech argue that students are not exposed to the true multifaceted world, but instead are sheltered and only exposed to viewpoints similar to their own. However, this call for free speech is fundamentally muddled. The United States government has not restricted free speech or hate speech in any way, shape, or form. The plea for free speech is thus not a cry for free speech, but rather a call to change our accepted speech. This ultimately begs the question, is the movement to change accepted speech a movement to increase intellectual viewpoint diversity in academia and the media, or rather knee-jerk backlash at the changing social presence of previously suppressed and underrepresented groups? Acceptable conversations have changed with the advent of rights for marginalized groups. This dynamic shift in the conversation has forced previously dominant white, male, straight, or Christian voices to contend with new emerging viewpoints and positions. This backlash against political correctness at times is against what is justifiably sheer absurdity, but other times is used to express the desire to revert to previous prejudice and norms. Opposition to using a gender non-conforming or transgender person's preferred pronouns is often framed as a matter of political correctness, but it's also a matter of basic human respect. However, backlash against political correctness may also be against recent developments such as trigger warnings in safe spaces. A trigger warning may shield someone from opposing viewpoints, or may protect them from reliving unwanted trauma. A safe space is an area to speak without critical opposition. Those benefiting from entrenched power structures may never understand the mentally and emotionally taxing process of having to defend your struggles and never venting about them. These all fit into the growing call for viewpoint diversity and less censorship on acceptable speech. One piece of this platform also fears that the limits on acceptable speech could entail for free speech. Trying to deny freedom of speech to one group could eventually have devastating effects on others. The American Civil Liberties Union supports this notion and has such fought in court for the right of neo-Nazis to gather in Charlottesville. However, the slippery slope argument and the call for viewpoint diversity are too simplified in their principles and refuse to engage in further complexity. Retaliation against the growing lack of viewpoint diversity often cites the same argument. Bring figures with reprehensible views into the public sphere so that way their arguments can be challenged and deconstructed for everyone to see. This argument, ironically enough, treats everyone who is challenged as a speaker public persona in broad strokes, implicitly ignoring any further complexity. Just because people have views that can be seen as racist, sexist, homophobic, or Islamophobic doesn't necessarily mean that their voices should be shut down. After all, there's another side to Karl Popper's paradox. He qualifies himself specifically stating that he does not imply, for instance, that we should always suppress the utterance of intolerant philosophies as long as we can counter them by rational argument and keep them in check by public opinion. Suppression would certainly be unwise. So how does this grapple with the demand for intolerance for the intolerant and less rigid views on acceptable speech? The answer is in analyzing not so subtle nuances. For example, Ann Coulter is a highly controversial figure who espouses highly inflammatory remarks. Many regard her to be at best a racist and at worst a racist provocateur. However, Coulter has views that can be challenged and debated and put down if necessary to paradoxically promote tolerance. However, these same circumstances do not apply to someone like Richard Spencer. Spencer is a white supremacist, a neo-Nazi, and a believer in peaceful ethnic cleansing. This language is not just controversial or inflammatory, it is clearly dangerous. Spencer believes that one race is superior to another and follows a platform eerily similar to those leading to ethnic genocide. Richard Spencer is not an Ann Coulter, where he can be countered through rational argument. Giving him a public platform is thus dangerous, as it allows for those who may latently support his beliefs or are previously on the edge of supporting his beliefs to feel empowered, contributing to a menacing neo-Nazi movement. Changing what's acceptable speech in the public sphere thus may require a need for greater viewpoint diversity, but not a need for clear advocation of ethnic cleansing. Viewpoint diversity supporters claiming that people like Richard Spencer should have a right to speak on public platforms too either are creating a gross false equivalence between offensive and dangerous beliefs, or is suddenly part of the knee-jerk backlash to growing voices of the previously underrepresented. The United States does not have a problem censoring free speech. It is the American people themselves deciding what is acceptable or unacceptable speech. Acceptable speech may limit certain viewpoints, but no one has a right to be heard. We just have a right to speak. Looser limits on accepted speech in the media and academia can be implemented as long as they make sure not to fall victim to false equivalencies between offensive and dangerous. A call for greater viewpoint diversity thus needs to understand why the marginalized demand to no longer be disrespected, and also needs to examine the broad strokes they place repressed speakers into. I believe that thus we can begin to have more productive and fruitful conversations on clearing the line for acceptable speech in America, as long as we understand the nuances of intolerant speech in a tolerant society. Thank you for coming to my TEDx talk, and here are my sources.